Hey everyone, it's Norm from Tested, and welcome to another 3D printing video, sharing my ongoing adventures in this really fun hobby. I am back from paternity leave, so everyone is healthy, happy, and very thankful for that, of course. But during my time off, I did have a little bit of downtime while the new baby was sleeping to do some 3D printing. And I thought it'd be fun to continue this series of videos and really use it as an opportunity to showcase some of the amazing artists and character designers that have been publishing their work for people with 3D printers to download and buy and support. So, we used to do a Print the Mystery Object series showcasing capabilities of these early 3D printers almost 10 years ago now. But it was also a way to feature the models and the things that people have been uploading to sites like Thingiverse, and that community has grown so far and wide with sites like My Mini Factory and Patreon. And so I thought it'd be fun to, on a regular basis, highlight some of the modelers that I've been enjoying printing their works, and also hear from you some of the artists that you've been following so I can discover new places to find models as well. So we're going to start off with the prints in front of me. These all come from Lord of the Print, a pretty well-known, well-established collective of two artists that have a Patreon, and every month they put out a themed series of tabletop miniatures. So this month, April 2021, it's Japan themed, and so they have these kaiju, these dragons, 5 large dragons, as well as 8 small figurines, really designed for tabletop miniatures. So you can print them at small scale on like an Elegoo Mars 2 Pro or an Anycubic Photon, or you can print out the larger characters, something like this or like this. These are printed at 100% scale on something like an Elegoo Saturn or a Anycubic Mono X. You can even, of course, scale the figures much larger, and they do segment their models. The models come in full form, with bases, without bases, just with individual limbs that you can then fit together and glue together. As well as both unsupported and pre-supported Lychee models as well. And so, looking at some of their offerings from this month, I'm really, really impressed by the level of detail they have on something that's designed really for a tabletop scale. Really is made to showcase the level of detail and fidelity you get out of a resin printer, like a 4K resin printer, even though you can, of course, print these on FDM printers. I've scaled up a bunch of the figurines. So, at 100% scale, a small tabletop miniature without a base would be like this size, which kind of small. At this size, yes, the detail is there, but I did have a little bit of issue with the support on my settings. So, there's supposed to be katana blades here that didn't fully print. With the pre-supported models, you're locked into the orientation that they chose, and theoretically, it's supposed to all print out all okay. But I find that these are much better served when you scale them up. And so a figure like this, scaled up to 175%, still had a little bit of issues, again, with the way I oriented this. But here I get to much better appreciate some of that modeling detail. You have just incredible, just like horns, spikes coming out of the shoulders, just really, really nice surface sculpture work. I mean, even like a character like this, you have this hero, and look closely at just the hair. The hair here almost makes this difficult to create supports for, because you have the hair pushing off in different directions. And so the pre-supported one is what I printed here. And yeah, you see a little bit of error here on the knee, but I'm still very happy with how this turned out in this really awesome pose of this character holding a dragon arm. And so this, combined with the dragons they have, which I chose to print in some clear resin. This is a lovely sleeping dragon, for example. And this is actually one of their starter kit models, a really, really cool horned dragon. Just, again, really amazing detail. And these are just a few of the models that they've put out. And the releases are timed releases. So after the passing of each month, the previous month's release becomes unavailable as a part of the Patreon, but they are put up individually on my mini factories, so you can buy them. But you get the best deal is to back them on Patreon, support them for as low as $10 a month, and you can get these STLs, and I've been having a ton of fun printing them. And really the showstopper, the best part of this month's release, the Japan themed one, is their Godzilla inspired kaiju. It's their big scale Godzilla. And you may have seen it pop up on social media, on Instagram, people sharing these like crazy. I took my own stab at printing their Godzilla. I wanted to do it all in one full print, and was able to fit it on the bed of the Elegoo Saturn at 75% scaling. And so pretty big, hollowed out. Took about almost 200 milliliters of resin, but I actually have it in this wash and cure station. And so the other thing I want to talk about today is this piece of kit that I've been testing. It's the Anycubic Wash and Cure Plus, and it's basically the largest wash and cure station I've seen on the marketplace. A bunch of companies make these. Elegoo has one. Anycubic had two previous models in a smaller size. Formlabs has their own as well, and they're all very similar in terms of what they do. Priced at around $150 to $200 for the smaller scale size ones. Basically, you take a print that comes off of your print bed, resin print, of course. You pry it off of the print bed, and you put it inside a reservoir here, a tub here that you have filled with your cleaning fluid. In most cases, like I have here, it's isopropyl alcohol, although in some cases, you could also use an alternative like mean green or simple green. Although those alternatives, they don't really dissolve the resin. They more kind of just wash off the resin off of the surface, and they're better served inside an ultrasonic cleaner as opposed to a wash and cure station where the agitator swirls around the washing fluid. And this wash bucket here has just the largest capacity of any I've seen so far. It has 8.5 liters is the max here, which is just over 2 gallons, and that's basically double the volume of washing fluid. So you do have to buy a lot if you want to fill up to the max. I have about a gallon of IPA in here because I'm not printing really tall prints, but let's take a look at how this works. So this shroud, which is of course tinted for specific reasons, it uncovers this tub, and on the inside I saved this just for you guys, has just been cleaned, my Godzilla model. And so there is a tray in here, a cleaning tray, and what I just took off is actually a top rung of the cleaning tray. And so one of the unique features, and we can kind of take a look at this, is that this sits on top of the tray. And if you have a build plate, you can actually fit the build plate, and it sits on top right here. This is made by Anycubic, this wash and cure station, and so it's really designed for the form factor and the build plate of the Anycubic Mono X. And it turns out the Elegoo Saturn's build plate, which is what I printed this on, slightly different form factor. You can get it to sit, but it actually isn't as wide, and you have a chance that the build plate goes all the way through. And so I do have to put it off axis a little bit, but the idea is that if you have a print on this build plate, the print goes right here, and you can actually then dunk this into your cleaning fluid. All right, so here's the basket of goods, and we have our print here. You can see there's this lower rung if you want to place the model with the build plate there. That's a pretty good height for printing something like this. And I have this model with the supports still on. And so I'm going to show you that these supports, actually, the way I've done them, come up super easy. So I'm just going to pry these off real quick. There it goes. Excellent. So I got my supports off, and as you can see, that came off pretty quickly. I didn't have to use any snips or nippers to tear them off, and part of that is because of the way I've set up the support when I was slicing this model. And so let's head over to my computer where I can show you exactly how I took this model from Lord of the Print, sliced it, and prepped it for printing. All right, so I've loaded their Godzilla model, and as you can see, the full model is way too big for the bed of the Elegoo Saturn here. So I'm going to scale it down, and I'm going to do 75%. So 75%, it can basically fit, but I'm going to reorient it, rotate it a bit. And my idea here for rotating it is I want to have the head basically mostly pointed upward. So see if I can do that basically a little bit like that. You can see I want, as the layers to go up, I want the finer points to be up there. So this is very close to fitting. Let me see if I can get that. What's nice is you can always look at the shadows here, and that's what tells you whether your model is going to go beyond the size of the bed. I'm going to do maybe one more axis of rotation. Let's try a little bit like that. Yes. That looks pretty good. And there you go. So 75% scaled, fits pretty well. And it's going to be a pretty long print because you can tell already with the way it's oriented, it's going to be sliced, like that. All right, so I don't want it to be a solid print because that's going to use a ton of resin, and I'll have to a ton of supports so it won't fall off the bed as I'm printing. So we're going to hollow this out. And with Box, very simple. Click hollow. I'm going to choose a wall thickness of 2 millimeters. That will work. No infill structure because the cavity here is it's pretty uniform. It's going to be a big cavity on the inside, and we're not going to be able to get access to any supports on the inside. And this precision setting here is basically how much detail do I want on the inside. Now, that's not going to matter if you're using a completely opaque resin, but here I'm using a translucent resin, and 10% is fine. You can actually see it's not super detailed, but it's not going to affect the look of this. So let's take a look. We're going to hollow it. And after it's done, you can see it's going through every single layer. And you can tell the interior, it's very low poly, and that's that 10% precision, but still detailed enough that you can see it's basically one large cavity on the inside. After it does that, I want to do a thorough check to make sure there aren't any empty pockets in here. So if I go down, I can tell, okay, that's going to be one big cavity. The places where I can fear because of the wall thickness, are the arms connected? So this hole here, yep, it's going to be connected. You can see that's where that cavity is connected. Same with this arm, the legs as well. I'm not worried about that because the feet are pretty big. And then the tail also. So what I want is one, for each cavity, I guess you also need to have a hole for any of the resin and washing fluid to pour out. With each cavity, you would need at least one hole. So we're going to do a couple of hole punches, and that's this button here. Circle will work. 2 millimeter, 4 millimeter depth, that's fine. You have the option of keeping the hole if you want to plug it in. I rarely plug them in. And for me, my strategy is I like putting the holes where I would have the base. So where the feet are, it's going to be mostly hidden in the ground. So you can see I punch the hole really easily in there. And that's going to, even at a 2 millimeter diameter, allow IPA and resin to, or not allow resin to not be trapped in and allow IPA to very easily go in there and soak. And I also like adding a hole inside the mouth. See if I can get this one. This one's sometimes a little tricky because of the geometry here. Oh, there it goes. I got a hole at the top of the mouth. That works just fine. And that's going to allow either resin or IPA to pour out, or air, basically, to come in as the IPA is pouring out. All right, so the model is hollowed out, prepped, and now let's get to our supports. Box has a bunch of different support settings, basically 3 presets, light, medium, or heavy. And you can tell all these spots, these little dots here, is where it thinks it's going to populate some supports. And here's where I start looking at the base of the model. And every part that's red here, magenta here, or purple here, I guess, is where you need supports. In my settings, I have my density at 85%, which is pretty high. Some people will go between 70, 75, or 80%, but I always err on more supports, and we're going to go all. So that's going to generate a bunch of supports. So now that the supports are auto-generated, I want to show you the settings that I adjust and why I have the settings as such. My support settings are actually a variation of the settings that were shared with me by Uncle Jesse. So thank Uncle Jesse for that. And I've tuned them for kind of my environmental conditions and my preferences. So if we look at an anatomy of one of these support beams, you actually can break it down into top, middle, bottom, and a raft. We actually don't have a raft here, so go to the raft setting. None. That would be a whole plate that would connect through all of them. I like no raft setting because then it's easy to pry off individual supports. Although with the raft, you can use a flex plate and pop them all off at one time. But the bottom, that's the skate here. So that's this bottom section. You can adjust the parameters, so how it touches the platform, with this little lip here, the actual diameter, and if you highlight in Box, you actually get a visualization of what these parameters do. And so it's really smart to just kind of highlight and go through each of these to see exactly what's going to happen. And so it's pretty straightforward on the bottom. The middle is this long pole, and that's where the pillar, and that's where you can change the shape of the pillar. So right now we're using a cylinder. Makes sense. The diameter of the pillar, that's a pretty, affects how much resin you're using, the kind of stability of the pillar, and also then the small pillar shape, whether you have the long pillar or the small ones that kind of connect between the different pieces. I also have these cross beams here. These are the cross widths. But the parameter that I change the most is actually how the supports touch the model itself, this top setting here. And if you look at these settings, the contact shape, the contact diameter, and the contact depth, this is what I adjust to allow for easy removal of support. So if you look at the contact diameter, let's highlight this. You can see this is how, if you have a shape, like you can set this to be a sphere. Right now we have it none, so it really is just that little pinpoint that's touching the model here. And the depth, that's how much this pinpoint gets embedded into the model. And having this contact depth being something like 0.15 millimeters up to 0.25 millimeters, it's actually still strong enough to hold up the model, especially if you add more supports, but then also makes it really easy to tear off the supports once you go through that wash cycle. That's why it was so easy for me just to use my hands to rip off the supports and not really damage the model here at all, because this contact depth is so small. Now we're going to go back underneath the model again. Even though I have an 85% density, I still feel like I can add supports to make up for places where the software didn't account for. And these spikes, definitely want to make sure there's supports there because those are overhangs. And let's see, that's actually pretty good. I'm going to examine the mouth here because the teeth definitely need supports. And so maybe I add one like that on the inside. Maybe a connection point right there. And here's where it didn't add a support, but it had an indicator that it could be useful. All right, that's pretty good. You can see the supports, the base has fallen outside of the build platform, so very easy to move those in. Same with this side. It's changing kind of the angle of approach. And looks good to me. Now we'll slice it. And with my settings down here and on the Saturn, we'll do a quick inspection. Make sure there are no islands. Yeah, I can see how it's hollow, this cross section. Looks pretty good, and this uses about 175 milliliters, which is much less than if this was a solid model, and hopefully much less prone to failure with the model falling off because it gets too heavy. All right, let's go back to the finished print. Well, hope you found that useful and informative in the way I go through my workflow. And in that time, well, it hasn't fully dried yet, so I do have Another one I prepped in advance because we want these models to fully dry before you cure them. And now I can demonstrate the curing functionality of this Wash and Cure Station Plus. So we're going to take this tub off, and the tub actually perfectly registers and aligns to the wash and cure station with 4 magnets underneath the agitator. That's what actually helps it spin and rotate clockwise and counterclockwise. And so replacing that, I actually put a little turntable, and Anycubic included a reflective sheet here. Now, I've actually did a little bit of a modification because the reflective sheet that came on here was pretty flimsy and it kept on bowing up and getting in the way of the turntable. And so I just mocked up a laser cut piece of acrylic and glued that sheet so have a little more rigid. This sits perfectly flush here. And then the turntable keys in, and I put my now dry model of this Godzilla character in here. And you can see, of course, behind is where you have these UV LEDs. Now, to switch between the wash and cure modes, just press this button here, and I'm sorry, this button here, wash, cure, wash, cure. And in the very first Anycubic wash and cure station I tested, you actually only had 3 preset times. You can only wash or cure 2, 4, or 6 minutes. The Elegoo Mercury Plus wash and cure station has a dynamic timer where you can go up to 30 minutes, and you never really would cure 30 minutes for your standard resin here, although there are formulations of resin, like Formlabs has a resin where you want to cure 60 minutes to get the maximum toughness. But for something like this, you really only need to cure 2 to 4 minutes at most. So not only is this kind of cavity here larger, so it can support larger prints and has a bigger turntable, but also you can tilt this down, and so you get full coverage. And with that mirrored surface, you get full range of curing on a model. And don't worry, I can't actually turn this on to cure. So if I set it for 2 minutes, for example, it won't actually let me start. You'll hear that multiple beeping, and that's because the Anycubic printers, let me stop that, the Anycubic wash and cure stations actually have a sensor that needs to read the sticker on the back of the hood before it can actually turn on. So let's put the protective hood, which blocks out vast majority of that UV light, turn this up to 2 minutes, and then we'll press start. Course activates, and it's going to do its thing. The turntable motion, it's not as smooth as I would like. I really like a really smooth turntable motion on the previous models. It just makes for nicer B-roll footage. But you can see for this clear resin, it's getting all the nooks and crannies. And up close, you can really see that sculptural detail that Lord of the Print puts into their models, and this is at 75% scale. So the full Godzilla model is even bigger, and I would imagine if you wanted to print it piecemeal, just the limbs, and put it all together, you can get a really, really massive figurine here with this model. It looks really good in HDR. Whoop. And there we have it. Really, really awesome. Beautiful sculpt. And again, with it hollowed out, only about 200 milliliters of resin. And the supports came off super easily. I love this clear blue resin as well. Looks like, it's almost like glass in some ways. And I can, of course, put a clear coat on top of this to get it really, really shiny and translucent. Well, that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm a Big fan of this Wash and Cure Plus station. Just the size of it, how rock solid it is, how well it cures these models. I'll be using this for most of my curing going forward. And you'll find links below in the description for where you can find not only this Wash and Cure station, but also to Lord of the Prints Patreon, as well as their My Mini Factory web store. And I'd love to know from you what you've been printing lately, which artists you follow, because I'm always on the lookout for more artists to support and back and buy models from as we go on this 3D printing journey together. Thank you again so much for watching. I'm Norm, and I'll see you next time. Bye.